If you've hiked the Narrows in Zion National Park, walking along that icy river squeezed between 1,000-foot canyon walls on either side with only a sliver of sky above you, leave a comment and tell me what you heard. Echoes. The sound bouncing off the sandstone walls in ways that don't quite make sense. Whispers that could be water, wind, or something else entirely. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because what I'm about to tell you is my family's sacred secret for 5 generations. And after what happened last September, I want the whole world to know why no one should enter the Narrows after dark. My name is Joseph Redhawk. I'm 54 years old and have been a park ranger at Zion National Park for 31 years. But my family's connection to this area goes back much further than the park itself, further than the Mormon settlers who named it Zion, further even than the Spanish explorers who first mapped these canyons. My ancestors, the Southern Paiute tribe, have lived in the shadow of these red, rugged cliffs for over 1,000 years. They called this place by a different name. They called it Mukuntuweb, meaning the place of the gods. But they also gave it another name, one they whispered, the place where the river's voice is silenced. Zion National Park covers nearly 150,000 acres of southwestern Utah, a landscape of towering sandstone cliffs, narrow slot canyons, and the Virgin River that carved them over millions of years. The most famous feature is the Narrows, a 16-mile stretch where the canyon walls close in to just 20 feet apart while rising over 1,000 feet above your head. Hikers wade through the river itself because there's no trail. There's no room for a trail. There's just the water, the walls, and the thin ribbon of sky far above. Over 4 million people visit Zion each year. Hundreds of thousands of them hike through a section of the Narrows. They come for the adventure, the beauty, and the Instagram photos of sunlight streaming through the narrow gaps between the rocks. Most don't know what lives in the deepest parts of this canyon. Most won't go far enough to find out. And my family has been working to protect it for 5 generations, exactly like this. My great-great-grandfather, Walking Bear, was the healer of the Southern Paiute tribe when the first white settlers arrived in this valley in the 1860s. He was the keeper of ancient knowledge, stories explaining where the world came from, rituals that balanced the spirits, warnings that protected people from places they shouldn't go. He watched as the settlers built their farms along the Virgin River, carved roads into the red rocks, and constructed temples dedicated to the god they brought from beyond the salt flats. He watched as they changed the names of sacred places to foreign words. They named this place Little Zion, referring to the promised land in their sacred writings, unaware that this land already had a name, a history, and secrets stretching back to the beginning of time. Most importantly, he observed that they ignored all the warnings given to them by the Paiute tribe about the deep canyon where the river flowed between red stone walls. As was often the case with newcomers, the settlers behaved arrogantly. They believed that God would protect them from anything the ancient spirits might threaten them with. They believed that faith and firearms were sufficient to conquer any kind of wild nature. The canyon taught them otherwise. The settlers learned this the hard way. In the summer of 1872, a group of 7 entered the Narrows to find a faster route from the mountains to the settlements in the north. They were experienced frontier settlers, men who had overcome blizzards, droughts, Indian attacks, and every hardship the West could throw at them. At dawn, they entered the canyon well-equipped, confident that the canyon was just another obstacle to conquer. By nightfall, only one emerged. His name was Ezekiel Tanner, a blacksmith from Springdale who had joined the expedition to shoe horses. He was found wandering near the mouth of the canyon by the riverbank, his clothes torn, his hair as white as snow, his eyes staring into space, or at something no one else could see. His voice was gone. It wasn't hoarse. It wasn't damaged. It was as if something had reached into his throat and taken away his ability to make sound. His voice was gone. He never spoke again. Not a single word for the rest of his life. He lived another 40 years in a small cabin near Springdale, tending a garden, trading vegetables with his neighbors, attending church every Sunday, and mouthing the hymns without sound. And he wrote. He filled journal after journal with the same phrase, over and over again, in handwriting that grew more frantic with each page, more desperate, more insane. The water remembers. The walls have mouths. Don't let it learn your name. My great-great-grandfather was the one who found Ezekiel that night. He was the one who saw the terror in the man's eyes, a terror that went beyond fear, beyond madness, into something primal that the human mind wasn't designed to contain. And he was the one who understood what had happened in that canyon, because his people had always known. They had always performed the rituals that kept the thing in the Narrows satisfied. They had always made the offerings that kept it from hunting beyond the canyon walls. When Zion became a national park in 1919, my family faced a choice. We could leave and let the white man's government handle what lived in those canyons, which would have meant death for countless visitors. Or we could stay, take jobs as rangers and guides, and continue the work our ancestors had done for 1,000 years. We chose to stay. Every generation since has had at least one Red Hawk working in the park, guarding secrets that the federal government doesn't know exist, performing rituals that no official manual has ever documented. My father taught me the rules when I was 16, the same age his father taught him, the same age every Red Hawk learns the truth about what we protect. Rule number 1. The Narrows are closed from sunset to sunrise. This is park policy, enforced by rangers with flashlights and citation books. But the real reason has nothing to do with flash flood danger. The thing in the canyon wakes when the sun goes down. It sleeps during daylight, dormant in the deepest pools where the river runs cold and dark. But when night falls, it begins to move. Rule number 2. If a hiker reports hearing their name called in the canyon, not by a companion, but by the walls themselves, by the water, by something that sounds almost but not quite human, they must be escorted out immediately. The thing learns. It listens. Once it knows your name, it can call you. And those who answer, they belong to it. Rule number 3. The section of the Narrows known as Wall Street is permanently restricted after September 15th. The signs say it's for seasonal wildlife protection. The truth is that autumn is when the thing breeds. What it produces in those deep pools during September and October should never be seen by human eyes. Rule number 4. A Red Hawk must enter the canyon alone on the first night of every new moon and perform the silencing ritual at the place we call the throat, the narrowest point, where the walls are only 12 feet apart, and the river runs waist-deep even in drought. This has been done without fail since 1872, when my great-great-grandfather first learned the ritual from the oldest of the Paiute elders. The ritual quiets the thing, keeps it contained, keeps it from spreading beyond the canyon walls, from flowing downstream with the river, from reaching the towns and farms and families that have grown up in its shadow without ever knowing what sleeps so close to their beds. Rule number 5. If the river runs red without rain, evacuate the entire canyon system. Close the park. Call every Red Hawk still living, no matter where they are in the world, no matter what they're doing. The thing is hungry, not just hungry, starving, and animal offerings won't satisfy it. When the water turns red, it means the thing has tasted human blood and wants more. Only the combined ritual of the entire family, speaking in unison, channeling the power of every ancestor who came before, can push it back to sleep when it wakes that hungry. Rule number 6. Never, under any circumstances, tell the thing your true name. It can mimic voices with perfect accuracy, recreating the speech patterns of anyone it has ever taken. It can mimic faces, wearing the features of the dead, like masks made of water and memory. It can even mimic the people you love most, parents, children, lovers, friends who died before their time. It will try to trick you. It will use everything it's learned from everyone it's ever consumed. But without your true name, spoken by your own lips in acknowledgement of its call, it cannot claim you. Without your name, you can still escape. The moment you answer to it, the moment you accept its illusion as reality, you belong to it forever. I've followed these rules for 31 years. I've performed the ritual every new moon, standing waist-deep in freezing water at midnight, speaking words in a language my ancestors spoke before English existed. I've escorted dozens of terrified hikers out of the canyon after they heard things they couldn't explain. I've covered up disappearances, written reports that blamed flash floods and accidental drownings, and buried the truth so deep that no investigation could ever find it. And then, last September, a documentary filmmaker named Victoria Chase came to Zion with a plan to capture the first ever overnight footage from deep inside the Narrows, and everything I'd spent my life protecting began to fall apart. Victoria Chase had 3 million YouTube subscribers, a Netflix development deal, and a reputation for going places no other filmmaker would dare. She'd spent a night in the catacombs under Paris, documented the abandoned tunnels beneath New York City, filmed inside the exclusion zone at Chernobyl, and explored the cave systems of Mexico where ancient sacrifices had been performed centuries ago. Her brand was fear. Her audience wanted to see her scared, wanted to experience that fear vicariously through her cameras, wanted the thrill of danger without the actual risk. She gave them what they wanted, and they rewarded her with views, sponsorships, and a fame that most documentary filmmakers could only dream of. She arrived at the Park Visitor Center in early September with a crew of 4. 2 camera operators named David and Sarah, a sound technician named Mike, and a safety coordinator named James who had more climbing certifications than anyone I'd ever met. Her equipment was top of the line: waterproof cameras, drone rigs, underwater housings, night vision setups that could capture detail in near-total darkness. She had permits for extended backcountry filming, signed by the regional office in Salt Lake City after what I'm sure was an impressive presentation about the educational value of her project. She had insurance waivers that would protect the Park Service from any liability. She had emergency protocols, satellite communication equipment, GPS trackers for every member of her team. She had everything the bureaucracy required, everything the modern world demanded for a safe, controlled adventure in the wilderness. What she didn't have was any understanding of what she was walking into. What she didn't have was respect for the 1,000 years of warnings that my ancestors had tried to give to anyone who would listen. What she didn't have was the wisdom to know that some places aren't meant to be documented, filmed, shared with millions of viewers who would never understand what they were seeing. "We're planning to camp in the Narrows overnight," she told me during our first meeting, spreading maps across the table in my office. She was maybe 35, with sharp eyes and the confident posture of someone who was used to getting what she wanted. "Right here, at the confluence of Orderville Canyon. My research shows it's the widest point in the slot section, enough room to set up a small camp above the waterline." "The Narrows are closed at night," I said. "No exceptions. Flash flood danger, I know, but we've checked the weather forecasts for the entire region. No rain predicted for the next 2 weeks, and we have monitoring equipment that can detect changes in water level upstream. We'll have plenty of warning if conditions change. It's not about flash floods." The words came out before I could stop them. Victoria leaned forward, her eyes sharpening. "Then what is it about, Ranger Redhawk?" "Because I've done my research. I've looked at the incident reports from this canyon going back 50 years. The number of disappearances, drownings, people who just vanished, is statistically anomalous, way higher than any comparable canyon system in the country. She paused. What's really in there? I should have lied. I should have invented some boring explanation about unstable terrain or protected wildlife or anything that would make her lose interest. But something in her eyes told me that wouldn't work. Victoria Chase wasn't the kind of person who accepted easy answers. She was the kind of person who kept digging until she found the truth. The problem was, the truth would get her killed. There are things in this canyon that your cameras won't be able to capture, I said carefully. Things that the Park Service doesn't acknowledge because acknowledging them would mean admitting that we don't understand everything about this world. Things that my people have known about for 1,000 years. I expected her to laugh, to dismiss me as a superstitious old man clinging to primitive beliefs. Instead, she nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. Indigenous knowledge, she said. The things that science hasn't figured out how to measure yet. I've encountered that before, in Australia, in the Amazon, in places where the local people know things about the land that no university has ever documented. She met my eyes. I respect that, Ranger Redhawk. I really do. But I also believe that if something exists, it can be recorded, captured, shown to the world. And whatever's in your canyon, people deserve to know about it. Some knowledge is kept secret for a reason. Some things should stay hidden. That's exactly what they said about every discovery that ever changed the world. She stood, gathering her maps. I'm going into that canyon tomorrow night, Ranger, with or without your blessing. I'd prefer with, you clearly know more about this place than anyone, but I'm going either way. She left my office, and I sat alone in the gathering darkness, knowing that I'd failed to stop her, knowing that by this time tomorrow she'd be in the Narrows after dark, knowing that whatever happened next would be on my conscience. My nephew Marcus was 26 that year, fresh out of his training as a park ranger, eager to prove himself. He was the next generation of Redhawks, the one who would eventually inherit the journal, the rituals, the burden that our family had carried since before this land had a name the white man could pronounce. I'd been teaching him the truth for the past year, the same way my father taught me, the same way every Redhawk learned. He found me in my cabin that night, staring into the fire, the weight of generations pressing down on my shoulders. I heard about the filmmaker, he said, settling into the chair across from me. She's really going through with it? Tomorrow night, her and her whole crew, 5 people walking into that canyon after dark. I shook my head. I couldn't stop her. She has permits. She has the legal right to be there. Legal rights don't mean anything to what lives in the Narrows. No, they don't. I looked at my nephew, so young, so determined, so much like I'd been at his age. I'm going after them. Someone has to be there when things go wrong. Someone has to try to bring them out alive. Then I'm coming with you. Marcus, you taught me the rituals. You taught me the rules. You taught me that a Redhawk's duty is to protect people from what they don't understand. His jaw set with determination. Those 5 people are going to need all the protection they can get, and you shouldn't face whatever happens alone. He was right. I knew he was right, and part of me was grateful not to have to walk into that darkness by myself. Prepare the offerings, I said. All of them. And bring the speaking stones. If things go badly, we may need to perform the silencing early. We entered the Narrows just after sunset, about 2 hours behind Victoria's crew. The canyon was already deep in shadow, the last light of day clinging to the highest walls while darkness pooled below like black water. The temperature had dropped 15 degrees in the time it took the sun to disappear, and the river felt like ice around our legs as we waded upstream. Sound behaves strangely in the Narrows. The slot canyon walls create natural echo chambers that can make a whisper sound like a shout, and a shout sound like it's coming from everywhere at once. Every splash of our footsteps bounced back to us multiplied, layered over itself until it sounded like a dozen people wading through the darkness instead of 2. but that wasn't the sound that made Marcus grab my arm, his face pale in the dim light of our headlamps. It was the voice. Joseph. Clear as day despite the rushing water, coming from somewhere ahead of us, around the next bend in the canyon. Joseph Redhawk. I've been waiting for you. It was my father's voice. My father, who had died 12 years ago. My father, whose face I still saw in my dreams, whose hands I still remembered teaching me to tie knots and track deer and perform rituals that stretched back to the beginning of time. Don't listen, I said, as much to myself as to Marcus. Remember Rule 6. It's not him. It can never be him. How does it know your name? Marcus whispered. It's had 31 years to learn it. It's heard me speak it during the rituals. It's listened and learned and waited. I forced my legs to keep moving forward, fighting the instinct that screamed at me to turn around, to flee, to get out of this canyon before it was too late. The only thing protecting me is that I've never answered it, never acknowledged the voice as real. As long as I don't respond, it can't claim me. We pushed deeper into the canyon. The walls closed in, narrowing from 50 feet to 30 to 20. The strip of sky above us was just a ribbon of stars now, so far away they seemed like holes in a black ceiling. The water grew deeper, thigh-high, then waist-high, cold enough to make every step an effort. And then we found Victoria's camp, or what was left of it. The equipment was scattered across the small beach where they'd set up, cameras overturned in the shallow water, their expensive lenses cracked against the river stones. Cases broken open, their contents spilling into the current. Sleeping bags half submerged in the shallows, still zipped up as if their occupants had been dragged out of them. A portable stove lay on its side, fuel canisters rolling in the gentle current. Whatever had happened here had been sudden, violent, and absolutely silent. No one outside the canyon had heard a thing. 3 of the crew were huddled together against the canyon wall, pressed into a small alcove where the sandstone had eroded into a shallow cave. Their eyes were wide and unblinking, catching the light of my headlamp like the eyes of animals frozen in headlights. Their mouths were moving without sound. They weren't speaking. They weren't screaming. They were just mouthing words. The same words over and over, in perfect unison, like a choir performing a silent song. I recognized the words. They were Paiute, an ancient prayer of protection that my grandfather had taught me as a child. Words that had been spoken in this valley for 1,000 years before English existed. These people were from Los Angeles, from New York, from cities where the Paiute had never walked. They couldn't have known those words. They couldn't have learned them in the few hours since they'd entered the canyon. And yet here they were, reciting them perfectly, their lips and tongues forming syllables in a language they'd never heard, like recordings playing on loop, like puppets being moved by invisible strings. "Where are the other 2?" Marcus asked. There were 5 of them, Victoria and 4 crew members. One of the crew, the sound technician, I thought, though it was hard to tell in the darkness, raised a trembling hand and pointed deeper into the canyon. Toward the section we called the throat. Toward the narrowest, deepest, darkest part of the narrows, where even daylight barely reached. "She went to find it," the man said, his voice distant, dreaming. "She heard it calling. It knew her name. It kept saying her name over and over, and she went to find it." "Who went with her?" "David, the camera operator. He tried to stop her, but—" The man's eyes focused briefly, a moment of clarity breaking through whatever shock had claimed him. "It was wearing his mother's face, the thing in the water. It came up out of the river wearing his dead mother's face, and it asked him to come home. He was crying when he walked into the water. He was so happy." The clarity faded, and his eyes went distant again. So happy to see her again. Marcus made a sound beside me, something between a gasp and a moan. I understood. The thing in the Narrows didn't just mimic voices. It could mimic forms. It could reach into your memories, find the faces you loved most, and wear them like masks. Stay with them, I told Marcus. Keep them talking. Don't let them fall asleep. If they sleep, they might not wake up. And whatever you do, don't go near the water. Where are you going? To find Victoria, and to perform the silencing before this thing takes anyone else. I left my nephew with the survivors and waded deeper into the darkness. The walls narrowed until I could touch both sides at once. The water rose to my chest, and the voice of my father kept calling my name, kept telling me to stop fighting, to accept, to come home to the family that was waiting for me in the deep. I found Victoria at the throat, at Haes, the narrowest point in all the Narrows, a place where the canyon walls close in to just 12 feet apart, where the river runs waist deep even in drought, where the darkness is so complete that your headlamp feels like a match lit in a cathedral. The Paiute called this place the Swallowing Mouth, and they never entered it willingly. This was where my ancestors performed the most dangerous rituals, the ones that required direct confrontation with the thing that lived in the deep water. This was where 3 of my family members had been taken over the generations, absorbed into the collection that the thing kept in its endless hunger. Victoria was standing waist deep in the river, her camera raised, filming something I couldn't see. The recording light glowed red against the darkness, a tiny beacon of technology in a place that had existed long before technology, long before humanity, long before anything that we would recognize as life. Her lips were moving, and it took me a moment to realize she was narrating, doing her job, documenting what was happening, staying professional even as whatever she was witnessing drove her slowly, irreversibly mad. "It's beautiful," she was saying, her voice dreamy and distant, nothing like the sharp professional I'd met in my office. "So beautiful. The way it moves, the way it changes, like water becoming light, becoming faces, becoming water again. It's not one thing, it's everything. Everyone who ever walked into this canyon and never came out. They're all in there, all of them. Still alive, still aware, part of something bigger now, something that remembers everything, something ancient. Victoria." I kept my voice calm, steady. "I need you to come with me, right now. Don't look at it. Don't film it. Just turn around and walk toward my voice." "You don't understand?" She turned, and I saw her face in the dim glow of her camera's recording light. Her eyes were wet with tears, but she was smiling. Smiling like she'd just witnessed something miraculous. "It showed me all those people who disappeared over the years. They're not dead. They're preserved. The water remembers them. The walls keep them safe. They're part of the canyon now, forever. That's not preservation. That's consumption. It eats them, Victoria. It takes their memories, their faces, their voices. It uses them as bait to catch more." "No." She shook her head. "It showed me my grandmother. She died when I was 7. I barely remember her face, but it knew. It remembered for me. It gave her back to me." Her smile widened. "It can give everyone back. Everyone who was ever lost. Don't you want to see your father again, Joseph? Don't you want to hear his voice for real?" It knew my name. It had been listening to Victoria, learning from her, adding her knowledge to its collection. And now it was using her to tempt me, to make me answer, to make me acknowledge the voice that had been calling me for 31 years. I reached into my pack and pulled out the speaking stones, ancient river rocks carved with symbols that predated any written language. I began the silencing, chanting words that had been passed down through 100 generations of my family, words that weren't meant for human throats, but that we'd learned to speak anyway. The water around us began to churn. I've performed the silencing ritual dozens of times, but always during the new moon, always in the quiet hours when the thing slept deepest, always in preparation for the month ahead. Never like this, never while the thing was awake and aware and actively hunting, never while someone stood beside me, caught in its influence, fighting my attempts to save her. Never while the walls themselves seemed to breathe and the water churned with something vast moving beneath the surface. The water rose as I chanted, not from any flood upstream, but from the thing itself displacing it, pushing up from the depths where it had hidden for millennia. I couldn't see it directly. You can never see it directly, not and stay sane, not and walk away with your mind intact. But I saw its effects. The way the current reversed, flowing upstream against all physics and reason. The way the stone walls seemed to ripple and breathe, ancient sandstone becoming something organic, something alive. The way the darkness at the edges of my vision filled with faces, dozens of them, hundreds, all the people who had ever been taken, all watching with eyes that glowed like phosphorescence in deep water, like bioluminescence in ocean caves, like nothing that belonged in a freshwater river in the Utah desert. I recognized some of those faces. The 6 men who had disappeared in 1872, still wearing the same expressions of wonder and terror they'd had in their final moments. My great-uncle Thomas, who had been taken during a ritual gone wrong in 1954. Hikers and climbers and explorers from every decade since the park had opened, all preserved perfectly, all watching from the water with eyes that no longer belonged to them. Victoria screamed, not in fear, in ecstasy, in joy, in the terrible pleasure of someone who has seen beyond the veil and found it beautiful. It's coming. It's finally coming. I'm going to be part of it. I'm going to live forever. I'm going to remember everything, be everything, know everything. She started walking deeper into the canyon, toward the place where the faces were thickest, where the water churned and the walls breathed and something vast and ancient waited to add her to its collection. I grabbed her arm and pulled her back. She fought me with strength I wouldn't have expected from her frame, clawing at my face, trying to break free. All the while, I kept chanting, kept speaking the words of the silencing, kept focusing every ounce of will I had on pushing the thing back down into the dark where it belonged. The faces in the water began to fade. The current slowly returned to normal. The breathing of the walls settled into stillness. And Victoria, whatever hold it had on her mind finally breaking, collapsed against me and began to sob. "I saw them," she whispered. "All of them. They're still in there. They're still aware. They've been in there for hundreds of years, Joseph. Some of them for thousands. And they can't die. They can't escape. They just exist. Forever. Part of it forever. I know." I held her as she shook, as the full horror of what she'd witnessed finally broke through the thing's seductive illusions. "Now you understand why some secrets need to stay hidden, why some things should never be documented or studied or shown to the world. How do you stop it? How do you kill something like that? You don't. You can't. The silencing doesn't kill it. Nothing can kill it. The ritual just quiets it, makes it sleep. My ancestors learned that 1,000 years ago, after they lost half their tribe trying to destroy it. The best we can do is keep it contained, keep it fed with offerings so it doesn't hunger for human prey, keep people out of the canyon when it's awake. And if the rituals stop, if your family—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. "Then it wakes up, and it spreads, and everything it touches becomes part of it." I helped her to her feet, began guiding her back through the canyon toward where Marcus waited with the survivors. The Virgin River flows through this entire valley, through Springdale, through a dozen other towns, eventually joining the Colorado and flowing all the way to the Sea of Cortez. If the thing in the Narrows ever truly woke, ever truly broke free of the containment. I didn't need to finish. She understood. We made it out of the canyon just before dawn. The 3 surviving crew members were still alive, still conscious, though the shock of what they'd experienced would leave marks that no therapy could fully heal. David, the camera operator who had walked into the water to embrace his dead mother, was never found. Neither was his body. He belonged to the canyon now, another face in the collection, another voice it could use to lure future victims. Victoria kept her promise. She never released the footage from that night. She never spoke publicly about what she'd seen in the Narrows. But she did something I didn't expect. She stayed. She took a job with the Park Service, working under me, learning the truth about Zion and the dozens of other places in this country where things exist that science can't explain and history has tried to forget. She's not a Red Hawk by blood, but she's become one in spirit. She performs the new moon ritual with me now, wading into that freezing water at midnight, speaking words she's memorized but will never fully understand. She's learned to read the signs, the way the water changes color before the thing stirs, the way sound echoes differently when it's close to waking, the subtle vibration in the canyon walls that means the silencing needs to be performed early. When I'm gone, she'll continue the work. She and Marcus together, one carrying the blood of 1,000 years, the other carrying the conviction that some secrets are worth protecting with your life. I gave her Ezekiel Tanner's journals last year, all 40 of them, preserved in the Red Hawk family archives since his death in 1912. She read them in a single night, and when she came to me the next morning, I could see that she finally understood. Not just intellectually, but in her bones, in her soul, in whatever part of us recognizes truth when we see it. The water remembers. The walls have mouths. And the thing that lives in the Narrows is patient, ancient, and hungry in ways that human minds can barely comprehend. The thing in the Narrows is still there. It will always be there. It was ancient when my ancestors first found this valley, ancient when the first humans crossed the land bridge from Asia, ancient when dinosaurs walked the earth and the canyon walls were still forming under a prehistoric sea. It will still be ancient when humanity is nothing but a memory, when the canyon has eroded to nothing, when the sun expands to swallow the inner planets. Some things exist outside of time, some hungers never fade. All we can do is keep it asleep, keep it contained, keep the people who visit this beautiful, terrible place safe from a predator they'll never know exists. That's the Red Hawk burden. That's the weight we carry so that 4 million visitors a year can hike and climb and take photos without ever knowing how close they come to something that would devour their souls and wear their faces forever. If you ever visit Zion National Park, enjoy the red cliffs that glow like fire at sunset. Marvel at the hanging gardens, where water seeps from the sandstone and life grows in impossible places. Hike the Angel's Landing Trail if you dare, climbing the chains to a summit that feels like standing on top of the world. Take photos of the waterfalls and the wildlife and the views that have inspired artists and poets and seekers for generations. But leave the Narrows before dark. Always before dark. Stay on the marked trails, within the boundaries that my family has spent 5 generations establishing. And if you hear someone calling your name from the water, someone who sounds like a person you loved, a person you lost, a person who couldn't possibly be standing in that freezing river in the darkness between those ancient walls, don't answer. Don't ever answer. The water remembers everyone who ever walked into that canyon. The walls have absorbed every voice, every face, every name, and the thing that lives in the deepest pools, in the darkest shadows, in the places where the sun never reaches. It has been collecting people since before history began. It will call to you in voices you recognize. It will show you faces you thought you'd never see again. It will promise you reunion, peace, eternity. But what it offers isn't life. It's absorption, dissolution, an existence without end, without thought, without self. Just another fragment of consciousness trapped in an ancient hunger that will never be satisfied. Some things are worse than death. The thing in the Narrows is one of them. And as long as my family draws breath, as long as there's a red hawk to speak the old words and perform the old rituals, we'll keep it sleeping in the dark. That's our promise. That's our burden. That's our gift to everyone who will ever walk between those canyon walls and feel, just for a moment, the brush of something ancient against their souls.